Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to Never on the Back Foot. In this very special live stream, we will be reliving Team India's very historic campaign at the ICC Women's World Cup 2025. And who better than Mohit to, sort of, go in this journey with. Tonight we're looking at almost every single match that India's played, the top performers, unsung heroes, what this win, largely means for women's cricket. And in my prep too, I did, come up with a lot of questions that were running through my mind, which I'm sure, Mohit is obviously again the right person to sort of answer and get insights on. If you aren't already following him, please check out his Twitter. He does like some amazing work there, tweeting all the time about all things women's cricket. Having said all of that, Mohit, again, let's start on a very optimistic note. Like, just your assessment of India's campaign, right, at the World Cup. It's such a historic win, hasn't sunk in for me as yet. But how are you faring, man?
Yeah, I think it's super exciting, especially considering what all has happened, especially in the last 10 years. Like, we've come so close so many times, but just fallen slightly short either in the finals or semis. And I think because we've been following most of the players in this team right from the beginning of their careers, I feel like a lot of us know their journeys, what all they've been through, and how special this is for all of them, but also all the women who came before them and like contributed so much to taking Indian cricket to where it is today. And to do it on home soil in front of a packed crowd, which was maybe 97% full of people from India, was like quite amazing. So I think that makes it really special. And it's something that nobody will forget, like either the players or the people in the stands or us who were watching at home and cheering them on.
Absolutely, Mohit. I think when you were talking about the whole thing, I was literally getting goosebumps because I think just winning, a World Cup on home soil is such a special feeling. And the fact that India was able to do something and pull off something this incredible was really fun. We already have our, comment section saying, let's go. And even Hari Prasad asking us, like, how does India go forward from here? Actually, Mohit, this was a question that's saved for later. But then, I was just having a look at the FTP and everything. The next India plays is like what in February, right? Which is a massive break, considering that you'd sort of want them to play earlier. I know there's like the WPL and a bunch of other like franchise tournaments that's happening. But again, for you, your thoughts on where does India go from here?
Yeah, I think before that they have a series in Bangladesh in December. So that's technically like the first assignment. So they pretty much will be playing non-stop because like the domestic season is already underway. And then you'll have the Bangladesh tour, the WPL, and then obviously there's the Australia tour after that. And till the end of March, you also have domestic cricket. So it's going to be really packed for them, in fact, for the next 6 months or so, which is great. But to answer Hari's question, I think like the most important thing to do is like invest more at the grassroots level. Like if you see India's World Cup squad, most of them don't even come from the metros or your typically big cities. A lot of them come from small towns. So it's important for the scouts to go there, for the state associations to go there. A lot of it has already started happening thanks to the WPL. Like I think this year or in the last 2 years, we've had 8 or 10 state associations have a T20 league, which is a massive improvement from the one or two which were there, say, before the WPL. So I think the more you invest in grassroots and age group cricket, the more stronger your ecosystem gets. Like that is what Australia has done really well, which is why they've been so dominant for so long. So I think now at the top, the people are kind of taken care of, but it's the people who are lower in that chain and younger who we need to take care of and give them world class coaching, exposure, and all of that. But I think like we are also the under 19 champions. So clearly, like the age group thing also is working really well for us. So I think the aim now for India should be to be as dominant as Australia have been for the last 25 years. And I think that is where we can potentially go if we like start putting in the right kind of funding, if the corporates get behind the players, if the state associations start investing equally in women's cricket. So I think that is where we can potentially go.
Honestly, Mo, it's just keeping my fingers crossed that our pleased for all of this is being heard, right? We can actually do so much more for women's cricket in India, and hopefully this World Cup win, as will serve as a reminder of sorts. And we will discuss more about where India goes from here. But let's also get your first thoughts on just the way the BCCI itself, right, handled the entire World Cup. There was just so much discourse and conversation about the venues, the scheduling aspect, and everything, right, that was just transpiring in the background. I mean, India winning definitely, like hogs the limelight. People are just talking about that. But then your thoughts on just how BCCI went about the whole process, and were you happy, sad, neutral? Like your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like I'd say it's probably a combination of both the BCCI and the ICC because, like, ultimately it's the ICC whose name goes with the World Cup, like it's their trophy. So I think both of them probably could have done a lot better. But looking at all the tournaments that we've had in India over the years, I think we all know how things work, and this is how it has been. Like, even in 2023, it was the same. Even for the men's T20 World Cup, which is like literally in 3 months' time, it's more or less the same. So I think like in that ways, like it was nothing new, but we have a benchmark of say the T20 World Cup in England next year for the women, for which we already have all the information, ticketing details, venues, and all of that so much in advance. So I think that probably is the right way to go about things and just makes everyone's lives a lot more easier and simpler, even the players as well as all the other stakeholders. So hopefully like that also will get better in the years to come, but one can only hope.
Yeah, I mean, even this time around, right? The hope was that the marquee venues and some of the best venues would honestly get that opportunity to host the World Cup. But then we read a lot of reports about how those venues were being saved, for the men's T20 World Cup side of things, and then they want to experiment with like smaller venues for this World Cup. I mean, it did turn out to be like a blessing in disguise. We did see some good turnouts in venues like Vizag. We did see that happening in Indore and Guwahati to some extent as well. But Navi Mumbai obviously takes the cake, and I'm sure we will reserve a segment to just talk about the crowds and all the turnouts that happened there. But both again, just focusing our conversation back to India, right? Like, what do you make of India's ODI template? Like over the past year or so, India's played so many bilateral tours. We've seen the kind of evolution that the team has had since that last ODI World Cup. All the very sad, traumatic memories that we had. But this time around, it was such a refreshed team. You could see how it played out, right, in the World Cup too.
Absolutely. I think like even during the women's championship, we were probably the second most consistent side after Australia, which is why we also finished number two on the table. And I think going into the World Cup, India were most people's number two pick, if not the first pick. So that way, I think the expectations were really high heading into the World Cup, but then they had those three losses back to back. And suddenly we were struggling. I wouldn't say struggling, but like in a tricky place where they had to win a couple of games to be sure of semis qualification. So I think that dip kind of made it more interesting because it wasn't like some of the other World Cups in the past where India, like even be it the men or the women, where they've been completely dominant throughout the tournament, but then faltered in the knockout. So this I think was really interesting because they also I think really rallied and pulled back really well from those three back-to-back losses, all of which were very close games. Like all of them ended either in the last over or the second last over, which is as close as it can get in an ODI. So yeah, that also was probably a sign of the potential that they have because they weren't close to their best in any of those games, but they still came very close to winning. So I think they just peaked at the right time and reserved their two best games probably for the knockouts, apart from, say, the game against New Zealand, which was probably their other close to perfect performance.
Yeah, and we will be looking at each of those matches in isolation as well. But Mohit, here's probably a point where it's probably fair on my part to even ask you, like, when you look at it from an India POV, on the coaching front and even the captaincy front, right, are we ready to have the discussion about what next? Because for Harmanpreet Kaur too, she's right now 36. Again, not being disrespectful, like she's such a successful captain, but then in another 4 years, do we see her, play another ODI World Cup? It's, a big pertinent question to ask. Even on the coaching front, Amol Muzumdar has been so successful for the team. But do you think there's going to be changes and some sort of conversation about the transition side of things, or it's way too early to be delving into that?
I think like both of them are a little different because, like you said, for the coach, he can still be there in 4 years' time. Like there's no age restriction or something of that sort. And technically, you can't really let go of a coach who's won you a World Cup. Like at least in India, that doesn't happen immediately after that. And to be fair, like India have had a good year even before the World Cup, and he did take them to a second place finish, which is their best ever in the ICC Women's Championship. So I don't see any change happening there. And even if you're the BCCI, like there's no reason for you to change something that's working. When it comes to the captain, like at least like for the longest time till Harman took over as the T20 captain, India's always preferred having one person in charge across formats. So I think they might continue with Harman till the T20 World Cup next year by when she'll be 37. And then they might look at making Smriti the all format captain. Even like in this World Cup cycle, there were quite a few matches where Smriti was in charge. So they've kind of eased her into that leadership role. In the WPL, also, she's captaining one of the most high profile franchises where there's always a lot of pressure. You have the biggest stars in the team. So I think they're easing her into it. She's probably ready also, but I think we'll see that change only after the T20 World Cup next year, unless Harman herself wants to step down, which is again always an option. So it can be her choice as well. But I think when it comes to the BCCI, they might probably want to put a person in charge across all formats rather than doing it in a piecemeal fashion.
Yeah, no, fair point there. For the longest time, I think BCCI is not a fan of, the whole split captain philosophy. So they'd rather want one person to lead across all formats. And yeah, let's see, how this whole transition sort of goes. Hopefully, it's not a messy sort of a scenario and it's dealt with a lot of care. And in all likelihood, Smriti is going to be, the incumbent. So it is a smooth process for her as well. But again, coming back to India's campaign itself, Mohit, this is India's maiden World Cup victory. The fact that it's just rolling off my tongue so easily, I'm quite surprised at that. But then when you just look at the victory itself, right? It obviously does a world of good, right, for the profile of just women's sport in India and so much more, right? So again, if you had to probably look at the immediate and even the long term impact of this win, how do you put it in perspective?
I think it can potentially be massive because like again the main thing is like a lot more girls will start playing sport, not necessarily cricket but any kind of sport, which is like very important. And more importantly, like they'll receive better support from their parents or relatives or whoever it is who makes the decisions in their life while they are kids, because now they have an example in front of them. They are seeing the kind of attention the players are getting, the kind of money the players are getting, because ultimately those things are important. Because what most parents want for their child at the end of the day is for them to be financially secure and to be able to pursue their passion at the same time. But I think like the financial aspect is really key. And now with like the girls doing so well, a lot of them have already started bagging a lot more endorsements and things of that sort, which is ultimately very important. And hopefully that effect also trickles down to women in other sports, because once you start watching one sport, then there's a likelihood of you starting to watch many other sports as well. So I think the benefit again will be that a lot more young girls will start playing the sport, because probably some of the girls in this team itself started to play the sport really actively after maybe the 2017 World Cup, or that is when they decided that this is what I want to do full time. So now the effect will be a lot more, especially since it was happening in India. So you could go and watch it, or even if you didn't watch it, you could see it on your TV, you could hear it on the radio, or you could see it on national television. So I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. We are going to see a lot of tangible changes. I think Smriti Mandana herself was, talking about how she'd love to see a lot more girls, play gully cricket and even enroll in academies, right? It just opens the floodgates for a lot of parents to actually look at cricket as a viable option for their girls as well. And more than another interesting thing that, has been floating around all across social media, probably even pre-World Cup, was how a lot of people felt, hey, if India actually wins the World Cup, this is going to be the 83 moment for women's cricket. Now, again, just amongst us, like, where do we stand on this? Do you think it's a fair comparison? It's a fair metric to look at it that way? Because it's important to look at women's cricket like differently, right? But then the fact that we keep bringing in the 83 reference, like, again, how do you just view it?
I'd say it's probably more like the 2007 World Cup win for India because now Indian women's cricket has a dedicated fan base for a while. It is also having a lot of commercial interest because if you look at the prices at which the WPL franchises were sold, clearly people saw potential in it, which were really high. Whereas during 1983, like nobody really was investing in Indian cricket. Even the board wasn't keen and like you didn't have any broadcaster or anything of that sort. Whereas for women's cricket, probably 2017 would be a fair comparison with 1983 because after that the funds started coming in. You had proper contracts, equal match fees, and numerous other things over the years. I think this potentially could be more like the 2007 T20 World Cup win for India, after which you saw like IPL really taking off, the brands like really getting behind the players, them probably earning a lot more off pitch than whatever they earn through their match fees. So I think that is what potentially can now happen for the women because currently, like most of them don't even have a job, right? Unless you represent railways on the domestic circuit. So I think now this will lead to the professionalization of women's cricket in that sense. So in that way, you can probably compare it to 83 as well because women's cricket in India is currently 20 or 30 years behind where the men are in terms of professionalization. So that can now fully take shape.
I mean, fair point there, Mohit. And even just looking at the financial aspect side of things, the BCCI very generously, I'd say, announced a cash prize announcement of what, 51 crores for this World Cup winning team. Just to again put this in context, the men's team received what, 125 crores when they won the T20 World Cup in 2024, and about 58 crores when they won the Champions Trophy in 2025. Uh, Again, it just doesn't feel fair, right, for the women who have won an ODI World Cup. This is their maiden victory, something so massive. I know the ICC prize money is also, a massive amount, but the BCCI's cash prize of just 51 crores left a sour taste in your mouth, or again, you're not reading too much into it?
No, I think in the ideal scenario, you would want everybody to get the same prize. It's something that the non cricket sports people also talk about a lot. Like, for example, when a cricketer wins a World Cup, they get paid in crores by the state government, at least some of them do. Whereas if somebody wins an Olympic medal or, say, like the world championship in their sport, they don't get that kind of money, which is a very fair point on their part. So, similarly, like you would want the women to get the same prize money as the men because ultimately, I think probably you play a couple of matches lesser than the men, but the achievement is the same. Like you are the world champions. So going just by that regard, I think definitely the prize money has to be the same. So if you like, it can change basis the format. But if you're paying somebody 100 crores for a ODI tournament, then it has to be the same for both men and women.
Yeah, again, in that ideal world, we'd hope that the BCCI, just wakes up and realizes and, spells the coffee and actually, ends up doing the right things. But even just on the announcement front for a parade, right, there's been nothing. A lot of fans have been left very disappointed. Again, Mohit, where do you stand on this? Because we've recently had the whole Stampede incident with RCB, and it's left a lot of fans and obviously, the organizers and the management disturbed in that regard. But do you see one happening for this, very special win?
Honestly, like things like parades and all, like I don't know what purpose they serve because in a country like India, you're like one step away from a disaster when like something like that happens. And unfortunately, now it has happened, and there's a precedent right in front of us. So like you'd much rather do something to actually help women in sport. Like these girls can go and talk to women, coach them, or whatever it is. Like those kind of things would actually move the needle. Or like you start paying them better, start giving them contracts at the domestic level itself. So I'd much rather see initiatives like that than a parade, which is just like a one time thing that you do to like appease either the media or the fans or whoever. But it's not something that's necessary if you ask me. Like it's something that happens in other countries as well and not just in India. But again, like after the Bangalore thing, like it's also important to be careful. Even had that not happened, it's still important to be careful. And there are people who've spoken about there being no need for such. Like a lot of people think it's gimmicky as well. So I think you'd much rather do something that actually helps and inspires people rather than just doing something for the optics of it.
I mean, very fair points there, Mohit. Like, it's better to do, meaningful things rather than, doing something this gimmicky where there's always the chance of, things really going south and, us being in a situation where, we have to cut a sorry figure. But yeah, I think, talk about India's campaign itself, right? 20 minutes into the conversation, I've only, peppered you with bouncers. And I think it's, fair that we actually talk about India's campaign, right? Because when you just look at it, India started off with two warm-up games, one of which, saw them lose very comprehensively to England, and a lot of fans, just throwing their hats, just absolutely losing it. And then, they eventually ended up defeating New Zealand as well. What did you make of just those warm-up matches? Again, a lot of fans don't read too deeply into it, but some get deeply affected as well. Yeah, which end of the spectrum were you on?
No, I always like don't take warm up games very seriously because that's just an opportunity to get some game time into your reserve players. Like if you looked at India's teams also, I think they'd rested Smriti and Harman for the first game, and even in the second game, I don't think Smriti batted at all. So I think it's just a chance to give your reserve players some game time, and you don't even like always end up playing the same batters or bowlers that you would, or bowling or batting them in the position that they would be bowling or batting in. So I think for warm up games, like especially since it was a home World Cup, like I wouldn't read too much into it. If you're going to some country where you've never played before, then maybe warm up games are important. But I think for India, it was just an opportunity to give some good game time to the four people who they weren't going to field in their 11. And I think they achieved that purpose in those two warm up games because all their reserve bowlers and batters got some time in the middle. I think Kuma Chetri played a really good knock. So something like that is more important rather than the result of the match because there was a situation where Richa got injured and they had to get her in as a substitute in that match. But had the injury been more serious, you would have needed her to bat as well. So that is where like the warm up games can help you.
Absolutely, and even I, for one, didn't take the results too seriously. Like there's a part of me where I was slightly worried, but then I still like, this is a team that has done really well, and they were just experimenting a lot in the warm up, so might as well not get that affected. But that's when India's group stage saw them, start off with some very solid wins, right, versus Sri Lanka and Pakistan. A lot of fans, just getting that confidence that hey, this is a team that's right on track, starting the World Cup on such a beautiful note. Mohit, again, what did you make of those wins and takeaways from those matches?
Yeah, I think sometimes you need a bit of luck and good fortune because again, Sri Lanka, we were in a really tricky spot, and then there's that key partnership between Amanjot and Deepti, but you had four dropped catches of Amanjot, which doesn't happen very often. Like, how often do you get one batter dropped four times in an international game? But to their credit, they like made the most of it and got a score which was out of reach. So I think that was probably one of the key points. Like when Sri Lanka had the chance to put their foot on the pedal and like really strangle India, they missed those opportunities. And to India's credit, they capitalized on those opportunities. But to me personally, like India looked very rusty in those two games, especially with the bat. The bowlers, I think, did a really good job. But by then, like in those two games, I don't think that big players also contributed. Like Jemmy had a tough start. Smriti again had two lowish scores, her two lowest scores, in fact, of the year. And Harman also didn't really have a major contribution. So after those first couple of games, you really needed India's big guns to fire. So that at that point of time, I was honestly a little worried because in a World Cup, you need your biggest names to stand up. And at that stage, that wasn't quite happening. It was more the first timers and the newcomers like Amanjot, Kranti, who were like getting the job done for them.
Yeah, I mean, India did take a world of confidence from those wins. I mean, as rusty and not so clinical they were, we still sort of took it in our stride. And as much as a lot of us would have sort of wanted to celebrate this fairy tale start and like something like the men's team in that 2023 World Cup where they were just like almost unbeaten. Here comes a twist in the tail. India slumps to what, three consecutive losses versus South Africa, Australia, and England. Suddenly you can see, the panic button has been pressed, all alarms start ringing again. Now, Mohit, if you were to, sort of process those losses, and just your observation, like earlier you did mention that, the losses were just made out like so big, and it wasn't like, India lost like comprehensively. They were close wins, sorry, close losses. And there was, some sort of, again, panic amongst the fans. But your observations from those three losses?
I think I wouldn't read too much into the loss against Australia, particularly because like they got the highest score of the tournament against them. And even in the chase, like they did reasonably well. It wasn't like the best bowling performance, but they were in the match for a significant amount of time. And for the other two losses are the ones that I think would have really disappointed them because these are like two teams that they really were dominant against in the last 3 years. And even in these two matches, they were in full control for a very long time. Like against South Africa, they probably lost it in the last 10 overs where their dead bowling really let them down, and probably playing just five bowlers really strangulated them. And similarly against England, the England loss I think led to a lot of soul searching because the equation at one point was under a runner ball and you had what 7 wickets in hand. So, and it was nothing new. Like India had lost like this multiple times over the years. So I think that is what made them relook their combination, and they also made a few mistakes, like dropping Jemimah was a bizarre call, I'd say. Also, they weren't playing Renuka in every game at the beginning. So these losses kind of finally got them to play their best 11, which probably wasn't happening until then.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. And I think, the whole aspect of the team combinations is a point I will talk about later. But as much as, a lot of fans were, going into a tizzy, and you could see a lot of hate being directed at the players, which in no world is okay. Finally there's some relief. We had that win versus New Zealand, that sort of ensured a qualification as well. Mohit, your takeaways from that game. And again, New Zealand was a side that you'd not want to underestimate, but then going in you had some confidence that India could probably just seal this game and wrap it up.
Yeah, like New Zealand, we've typically struggled against, especially like in world tournaments. Like we lost to them in the last T20 World Cup as well as the last ODI World Cup. And they are also the defending world champions in T20, obviously a different format. So I don't think like India would have underestimated them at all, like you're saying. And it was a tricky encounter. But I really feel like India really lifted their game in that match. And also like Jemimah coming in at number three made a big difference because like that really upped the rate. Like they got probably their highest opening partnership ever, but like the big difference was the number three here didn't like let up the intensity and she took it to another level altogether. So I think the score once they had the runs on the board, like you knew New Zealand would really struggle to get them even in a rain shortened match. So I think that is where a lot of things fell into place for them. That is also I think when they finally played both Renuka and Amanjot together. So like the bowling also started to do really well. So I think a lot of things fell into place for them in that New Zealand match, and that was really good. Or maybe I think Amanjot came in the next match, but still like the Jemmy moving up to three and playing that innings really made a huge difference.
Absolutely. And I think that's where we could really see, the team management being probably a little more mindful about the team combination and choices, because nearing, the knockouts and that fag into the tournament, you'd want them to, sort of be more cognizant of the changes that they are making. And India's last league match was, that encounter with Bangladesh. Unfortunate that it was a rain affected match, extremely frustrating as a viewer, and, for all of us who were sort of covering that game. So, at large, right, again, through the tournament, we've seen how weather has played such an important role in, sort of dictating the outcome for so many matches. Mohit, like, what was the mindset behind, keeping a World Cup, in these months, in these specific venues, Sri Lanka for one? And did you, like, just get very frustrated with what was happening with, weather playing spoilsport?
Yeah, it was quite frustrating because you had like six no results, which is like one of the highest ever in any ICC tournament. And that obviously is very frustrating. I think Sophie Devine probably put it the best when she said, like, we prepared 4 years for this tournament and then to not have the opportunity to play is really heartbreaking. So I think that is really sad because, like, these are people who've put, I don't know how many years of their life into this, and then to be deprived of that opportunity to play is what is really saddening, especially when you know that rain is expected at this time of the year. Like, obviously, if it's unseasonal rain, then it's a different thing. But like, when you know it's the wettest month of the year in a certain city or country, like, you can always look at an alternative venue. And that, I think, was the disappointing part about not doing anything when you already know that things would potentially be affected.
I mean, ideally, you'd want your organizers to be more, like aware of weather conditions, do the bare minimum research to see, like when are the rainy months in certain places. And I think rain, really in the literal sense was a dampener to a lot of prospects for teams, who are vying for a spot in the knockouts. And hopefully in the future, we will not see a situation where, rain is the culprit and, it's just like washing away so many matches. Now, in spite of all of that, I mean, India had already qualified, and that's where the semi-final versus Australia comes into perspective, right? The match clearly stands the test of time for being so iconic, right? I mean, going into the match, a lot of fans were worried. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't myself, because it's very rare, right? You see a performance like Harmanpreet that absolutely blows away Australia. Australia and India's head-to-head record as well. I think we'll just literally cry if we talk about it. But then comes a knock from Jemimah Rodriguez that quite literally changes the complexion of the game. Mohit, talk to us about your feelings, about this match when you were just watching it. Were you just like sitting in one position, bringing out all of your superstitions to the fore?
Yeah, no, like you said, the most satisfying thing probably was this time around. It was a team effort. Like the last time we beat them in the ODI World Cup was through individual brilliance, which, like you rightly said, doesn't happen every day or even every tournament. So, for like so many of India's top players to like chip in and make a big contribution and then beat them was very satisfying. Like, obviously, Jemimah got that 100, but you had really important contributions from the likes of Harman, Smriti, Richa. Even the bowlers like kind of pulled things back really well after Phoebe Litchfield got that 100, and then Ash Gardner also went ballistic. So I think it was a team effort, and that is what was most satisfying to see, because when you have multiple contributors and beat them, which hasn't been the case since probably the 2009 World Cup when we beat them twice through contributions from various people. It's very satisfying because whenever we beat them in the last 10, 12 years, it's been through individual brilliance from Harman or Smriti or Jhulan or Mithali, especially in the ODI format. So to see a team effort and then beat them was satisfying, because then you know that this can happen again and it isn't a one off. And India were like the better team on the day. Australia missed a few key chances, which is very uncharacteristic, which I think Alisa Healy also spoke about. And it's a little worrying for them because now it's happened two World Cups in a row. Like if you've played your best cricket and you lose, it's still okay. But considering the standards that Australia set, I think they would be very disappointed because they had the runs on the board, and even with dew and a wet outfield, I think they would have still backed themselves to see that match out. But for India, I think it would rank as probably the greatest win ever, because again, like that previous win was because of that 171 not out largely. Whereas this time, like India were probably better across all three departments, including fielding, which I think says a lot about how well they played on that day.
Yeah, I mean, if we start talking about Australia, it'll take us, on a whole different tangent, because it was one of those matches that just reminded us that hey, the Aussie team is also human. They can also, sort of make mistakes, but that doesn't take away, right, from India and the kind of team effort. But I think one of the chief architects for India's win in that match was Jemimah Rodriguez herself. So, Mohit, if you had to just talk about her knock, how incredibly special that was, I think for the longest time, we're just going to keep raving about it because of how special it was. Jenny also spoke, post match about all the struggles and all the battles that she'd, silently been fighting till then. It just makes the knock all the more special and just unforgettable, right?
Absolutely. Like you said, she spoke very candidly about anxiety and her mental health struggles through the tournament after that knock. But also, even heading into that match or the New Zealand match, like she was dropped for a match. And it's not very often that you see a player who's come back, score a 50, and then score 100. Like, so that just shows her strength of character. And it's never easy, right? Like when you've been one of the best players in the team for so long and then suddenly you're just dropped. and then to come back in two must-win games and deliver the goods is not easy at all. So that just shows how special a player she is, how dedicated she is, and to do it in spite of whatever she was going through just makes it even more special because this was happening in her home city, in her hometown. So there must be a lot of people in the stands also who knew her, who she might know as well. So that always brings additional pressure, no matter how tough you think you are. So to do it there, I think made it even more special. And like you said, like number three is not somewhere she has batted off late, especially in ODIs. So to also like move to a new position and then do so well. And in that Australia game, it wasn't like the New Zealand game where you had like a 200 run opening partnership. So to come back, come in after the fall of an early wicket and then play that innings, and most importantly, stay unbeaten and see the chase through. So that's just a testament to her character and the class that she possesses.
Yeah, and hopefully this is the start of many such special knocks for this incredibly special woman, right? I think for the longest time, she's been just branded as, being very talented or someone who can produce a knock like this. But to actually see her, step up when the team sort of most needs her, as you rightly said, is a testament to her character. And fingers crossed, that she is finally hitting her peak and can continue delivering like that for India. Now, when a knock like that happens, obviously, India would find themselves on the right side of the result, which meant, hey, a finals berth has been sought, and a final versus South Africa was on cards. Now, Mohit, if you again had to look at the final itself, India put in a very clinical performance. I think much against public opinion, where a lot of people felt, India was still lacking and there were areas that were still concerning. I'd still say it was a very clinical win and something they would really be proud of. Your biggest talking points from that game?
Yeah, I think, like you said, it was quite a dominant win in the end. The result, the margin was quite significant, 40 plus runs. So it wasn't really a very close game. Like till the time Laura was batting for South Africa, obviously they were in the chase considering the kind of player she is, the form she's been in for the longest point of time. And like massive credit to her as well to like get a century in both the semis and finals is not something that anyone other than Alisa Healy's done, who's probably like the greatest knockouts player ever. So I think massive credit to Laura for like pulling that team to the finals for the third ICC event in a row. But to answer your question, I think for India, Shafali Verma was obviously the big, I wouldn't say revelation because we know what she's capable of, but still, like there were a lot of people who were questioning her inclusion. And we just spoke about Jemmy. So for someone like Shafali, it was even more difficult because she wasn't even in the reserves. Maybe in her mind, she always believed that she could potentially play. But when you're out, you're out. And she was playing domestic cricket, piling on tons of runs for Haryana, captaining them really well. So to come out from the cold, and not from the cold, but from a very different level of cricket to probably the biggest match of her life and do so well is really remarkable. And then she not just did it with the bat but also with the ball. And those two wickets were a real turning point in the match. So I think like a lot of credit has to go to Harman also for giving her the ball because she hasn't really bowled a lot, or at least Harman hasn't bowled her a lot in the past. But to do it in the big game and then for it to come off like that just shows her captaincy smarts as well. So I think those, and obviously like we have to talk about Deepti because like a 50 as well as a 5 wicket haul in a final has never happened before. Like if you do one of those two things in a final, it's quite incredible. But to do both is something that will take some taking to even emulate or get close to. So I think she was a massive factor in that win, leading wicket taker in the tournament. And even in the very first match, I think she got that crucial runs against Sri Lanka. So from start to finish, she was the one senior player who was kind of pulling her way throughout. So massive credit to her as well, especially considering she's been in that situation many times in the past where she's not gotten India over the line. So to turn it around so convincingly must be very satisfying for her as well.
Absolutely. Actually, Deepti, the MVP very deservingly was the point I was going to save for later. But thanks, Mohit, for bringing it up. We have a few interesting questions in our chat as well. Let's probably address that. Hari Prasad again goes on to ask us that, that does the final give India a situation to think about the, ODI opening combination? Or is it a no-brainer that Pratika is the incumbent opener with Shafali being her backup? Now, this is such an interesting question because Mohit, I was exactly having this conversation with my mother, and we could not come to a conclusion because the kind of situation that India finds themselves in is quite complicated, right? Pratika was one of the highest run getters, not just for India, but even in like the overall charts. Shafali Verma has been doing so well in the domestic side of things. Agreed, her ODI like patch of form was not that great. Yeah, so if you were, one of the people, who had to make this decision, how does it play out for you?
Yeah, I think the thing here again, like we go back to the Harman thing then, because if Harman continues to play, because she clearly is still among India's best 11 in ODIs, so the number four slot is fixed for her. Smriti obviously is your opener. So then you have numbers two, three, and maybe five. But then Jemimah doing so well at three, that is then the tricky thing. Otherwise, you could always play Shafali as opener and Pratika at three. Because before she came into the Indian team, like Pratika has batted a lot at number three for Railways, especially. And she's also batted at three for Delhi in the past. So it's a position that she's used to. She's gotten multiple hundreds in that position on the domestic circuit. So I think then that again leaves Jemmy back at number five, which is a role that she's played really well. So I think then that is the option that they need to look at. But then that again will mean Shafali and Pratika will be the sixth bowler. Now, both of them are good bowlers, so you then just need to have that trust in them and maybe bowl them a lot more so that they also gain more confidence. So I think that is always an option that you open with Smriti and Shafali. Pratika is your number three, Harman at four, Jemmy at five, Richa at six or seven, and then you have your five bowlers. So I think there is enough uh, room for both of them to play. It's just that you'll then probably have to play with just five proper bowlers instead of six, with the sixth being Shafali and Pratika, which I think should be workable considering both of them bowled really well in this World Cup whenever they had the chance.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those problems that India would really like to, sort of address and have. But Mohit, here quickly to just chime in with the whole aspect. I mean, to also, play the devil's advocate. What about someone like a Harleen Dior, right? Who was that number three, like, for a large part of this World Cup, pre-World Cup as well, but suddenly just finds herself entirely out of conversation. I mean, that's how cricket is, right?
Yeah, like, and to be like, the problem with her was mostly the strike rate because she's still striking at under 80, which I don't think is what you need in a top team in 2025. She's played some good innings, like in those first two wins that you mentioned. She was probably one of India's better batters, like, she contributed in both those matches. But then when you have a player who can do the same thing at a much faster strike rate, you invariably end up missing out, which is unfortunate, but I'm sure she's a good player. So she will be either in the squad or in the selection conversations. It just depends on what she does in the WPL and the domestic circuit. Now we'll know tomorrow whether she is going to be in the same team or a new team. But if she is retained by Gujarat, that again is a big vote of confidence because she again has been their main Indian batter in the last 3 years. So there will be enough opportunities for her to make her mark and stake a claim. And the good thing is, like, when you have so many good batters, it just makes your side more competitive and stronger. Like if you look at Australia's 15 at any point of time, any of those 15 are good enough to get into the 11. So I think India also will now soon reach that stage where everyone in the squad is good enough to be in the 11, and whoever misses out is unfortunate. So that's just what it possibly can be for Hurleen, but form can always change. So if anybody goes out of form, you have a good backup in Hurleen because she's done it at number three, number four, number five. So she can bat anywhere in the middle order.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how that sort of plays out because now I think India's next focus will be the T20 World Cups. the strategy will be very T20 heavy and all of that. But Mohit, there was a point you brought in earlier in our conversation about the team combination itself, right? Where at one point, Renuka Singh Thakur was warming the bench, Jemimah was dropped in one of those matches. Amanjot herself was, finding it tough to get a place in that playing 11. Overall, if you just had to look at the kind of team combination that India was fielding, the playing 11 itself, like, were you convinced and happy with that? And again, just going a little back to the squad selection itself, right? The kind of squad that was selected at last, like, were you just happy with everything there?
Yeah, I think the squad they selected was on point and fair because you pick a squad based on what people have done, and the 15 that they had picked were probably the best performers in the last 12 months or so. Maybe one or two were picked on potential rather than performance, which always happens because you will invest in talented players if they've shown the ability to make an impact. And they did do that well. Like somebody like Charani didn't really have the numbers to back her up before the World Cup, but she was a huge reason why India won the World Cup. Probably India's second best bowler after Deepti. Some would even say she was the best bowler because in the two games against Australia, it was her who really stood out. So I think the 15 that was picked was largely on point. Somebody like Shafali again was unfortunate to miss out, but then again, the top three had been doing the job for India, so you couldn't really drop any of them. So I think the 15 that was picked was really good. Coming to the combination, I think heading into the World Cup, like us, the team also probably thought that bowling was the weaker suit, which is why they wanted to play the extra batter, which is why they were left with only five bowlers, out of which maybe one or two were all rounders. But then when they had those three losses, they realized that they need like more bowling options because like the captain then wasn't left with uh, many options in the field when the going got tough. So having that sixth option, I think probably really helped Harman. Whether they picked the right sixth option or not is debatable, but then the call of going in with six bowlers was something that worked for them, especially considering they had two genuine all rounders and those six bowlers and Deepti and Amanjot, who are like really good batters as well. So that meant they had really good batting till number seven, and the number eight also could like bat and hit a few every game. So I think that depth also was covered while they played their six bowlers because half of them could bat more than adequately.
I mean, it will be interesting to see what is the kind of combination that Team India wants to opt, going forward as well. Now you're a World Cup winning team. There's like a star on your chest, and it just means a lot of different things. But let's also take a question from a sports fan who goes on to ask us, like, how do you rate India's fielding and wicket keeping overall in this World Cup? Actually, the second part of the question, sport fan, we did sort of address it in the earlier part of our conversation. But more again, if you just had to look at the fielding and the wicket keeping side of things, your takeaways?
Yeah, I think the fielding was up and down, but overall, I think it was still a lot better than what we've seen in the past. And especially some of the fielding was exceptional. Like you always have those few fielders in this Indian team who always like stand out. Radha Yadav again had a lot of moments of brilliance. Jemimah was quite exceptional in some of the games. Even somebody like Arundhati Reddy, who didn't play a single match, but she took some great catches, made a lot of good stops in the field. So the fielding is definitely something that they can improve on, but you can see the improvement that they've made from say the last World Cup or even from 2017 to now. So it's something that's heading in the right direction. As for the wicketkeeper, I'd say like Richa Ghosh's batting is just so much better than anyone else that she will continue to be the wicketkeeper, but there is a lot of scope of improvement for her, especially while standing up to the stumps. So I think that is just something that she has to keep working on. But again, like the fielding, like if you look at her wicket keeping now compared to say the last World Cup or even the 2023 T20 World Cup, I think she's made some significant improvement. But there is scope for greater consistency. So I think she just has to work more on her reflexes and technique. But she's somebody who is putting in that work, and I'm sure she'll get even better in the years to come.
Absolutely, and fingers crossed that the team just keeps continuing to get better, and just doesn't get carried away. Again, this is coming from a very scared Indian fan, that a lot of this hype and all of that just and I just hope that the team continues to progress in the right direction. And just one last aspect about the final itself, sports fan goes on to ask us that South Africa shot their own foot by sending Jafta over strong power hitters in the lower order. It sucked momentum out of their innings. Although different formats, any patterns you see in South Africa's third final loss? To put this in context, like, just looking at the performances in the T20 World Cup, like 2023 and 24, where they went to the final and they lost. Now, this ODI final loss as well. I mean, it sort of weighs in on them, right? So, Mohit, again, are there any patterns you see in South Africa just not able to, make the most of those clutch moments and be on the right side of the result?
Yeah, like firstly, I fully agree with him. He's absolutely spot on because I think their best batters in the lower order were batting too low, be it like Chloe Tryon or Nadine de Klerk, especially considering the form that they'd been in. Like in the final, had they pushed Nadine de Klerk up to number 6 or 7 when Laura was still batting, you never know what could have happened. And she's not somebody who's just a slogger. Like she has good technique. She's shown that she can play the long innings and like even bat timeout. So I think they really erred by sending someone like Jafta higher up because she plays only one way and doesn't have like that range which somebody like Nadine especially has, or even Chloe to a lesser extent. So I think I fully agree with him. As for patterns, I think all the three matches that they lost were chasing. Like all the three finals that they lost were chasing. And in two of those, like they were in the match till the time Laura was batting. There's a clear over reliance on Laura Wolfart. It's a lot like, say, India with Mithali Raj in the 2000s. So there is that one star player who, till the time she's in the middle, they are in control. But once she gets dismissed, they kind of lose their way. So I think like the batting is a concern for them because like probably this time India got above par score, but in the two T20 World Cups, like the scores that they were chasing were chaseable. And even this score was chaseable because India chased down a much higher score against Australia in the semis. So I think they just need to work on getting more consistency into their other batters and finding a couple of batters who can like deliver in those high pressure matches as well. Because currently there's like a stark over reliance on Laura and then on Marizan Cup as well to a lesser extent. But those two have to do the heavy lifting for them in the knockouts, which doesn't always happen because like ultimately they are human and they will have their off days. So the others probably need to step up more. They are currently, I'd say, like India in that 2017 to 2020 kind of phase. So hopefully in another 4 years they'll be like India in 2025.
Yeah, and if reports are, suggesting that South Africa could be the potential host for that 2029 World Cup, I mean, what better way, right, to sort of script your own destiny by winning a World Cup on home soil? And they clearly seem to be headed, in the right direction. So again, fingers crossed that South Africa can sort of pull something really special like that. And more, again, just looking at India's campaign itself, like who are some of your favorite performers? I think in the chat we already have Hari Prasad, who earlier spoke about Kranti being deserving of a very special mention because of the fact that she's leading the pace attack with Renuka not starting in those few games has been such a revelation of sorts. You spoke about Deepti earlier too, but again, your favorite performers like, from an India perspective?
Yeah, I think like we've covered most of them. Deepti obviously got the MVP, like you said, but Jemimah and Shafali both had great comebacks. We spoke a lot about them as well. Even like Smriti and Harman really delivered in the big games. Like you had crucial knocks from them, from Smriti both against New Zealand and Australia, and from Harman against Australia. So they really pulled their weight in those big matches. Even in the final, like Smriti gave a really good start along with Shafali, and like she was talking a lot to Shafali. But like Hari's rightly saying, I think Kranti, especially in the first half of the tournament, was really good. I think by the end she kind of started losing her way a little. But to step up in those first few games, like Perry's rightly put, she was the only specialist pacer in the side, and she made her debut just 4 5 months before. Was like really exceptional. Like, and even in the lead up to the World Cup, like when we beat England and Australia, she was one of the standout performers in those ODIs as well. So I think like UP Warriors should really retain her because she's one who's shown that she can be a match winner even in the WPL. I think she bowled Meg Lanning last year with one of the balls of the tournament. So she's somebody who should really be invested in both by Indian cricket as well as a franchise. So I think she was a real standout. And then somebody like Charni again, like we spoke about, was really good. And to do it against the best team in the world, or at least the best team in the world, heading into the World Cup multiple times, really shows a lot about the kind of skill set she has.
Yeah, I mean, all amazing names you bring in there, in their own little way, they have contributed to India's success. And I think this is one campaign where we can confidently say, right, there's just been so many, like side characters, not just one main character. So this win, is all the more special in that way. And more, there was another point that I probably should have brought in earlier in our conversation when we were, chatting up about the finances and the commercial aspect side of things. But I'm sure you must have seen, right, the chatter on the whole equal match contracts and how that is something that really should be considered. Because right now, to just put it in context, the Indian cricketers, both men and women are getting the same equal match fees. But when it comes to contracts, there's like a vast gulf and there's like a lot of difference in that way. This World Cup has obviously, again, opened that whole Pandora's box of, conversation that, is there a possibility that, the contracts can be increased for women, if not on par with men, at least somewhere, besides what is the situation right now. Your thoughts on that? Do you see the possibility of it being increased? And I mean, it definitely merits a conversation, right?
Yeah, I think they definitely will be increased. I'd assume, like you said, maybe they won't be at par with the men, knowing how things have been and how it is across the world, not just in India, because I don't think any country pays their women exactly the same as the men when it comes to the contracts. But definitely, like you said, there's a vast discrepancy. So the first step is to reduce that discrepancy. And I don't think you need to win a World Cup for that to happen. But now that there are results on the board as well, it should happen. It should have happened irrespective. But now there's just more scrutiny and there will be more eyes on them. So I think they will be compelled to address that gap. So I hope that happens sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. I think, again, as fans, we'll just keep our fingers crossed that it happens. And really heartening to see, right? So many state governments actually announce like cash prize rewards for these players. And a financial incentive like this is definitely good signs. And even just talking about domestic cricket more, as we talk right now, we have the senior women's interzonal T20 trophy that's happening. Unfortunate that, just there's a handful of us who are probably, catching up with the scores on, through the scorecards on the BCCI app and the website. But again, a win like this, right, like a World Cup win, can definitely again open conversations to doing a lot more, right, for domestic cricket with respect to streaming and even domestic contracts for players, a point you brought in earlier in our conversation. So can we see that happening at some point now that, India are finally world champions and there is like a proper proof of concept that women's cricket is here to stay?
Yeah, I think the domestic contracts for players is something that definitely has to happen because it will then enable a lot more women to stay in the sport for longer and also get into the sport. Because in the past, we've seen so many Indian women who've either played for India or not played for India just retire by the time they are 30 because either there's family pressure to get married or to earn, which they like. Obviously, you get paid for the matches you play, but there's no contract or job security. Like it's on a match by match basis or season by season basis. Whereas, like in countries like England, Australia, and all, you do have domestic contracts for the players, even multi year contracts. So that really helps. So I think that is something that really needs to happen. The streaming also is something that should happen ideally, but that I think is difficult, especially maybe for the interzonals, it's easier because it's just one city where all the matches happen and there's just three matches in a day. But otherwise, at the domestic level, they play like some 15, 16 matches in a day, and it might not be possible to stream all of them. But yeah, at least for the interzonals and the bigger tournaments, they should be streaming every match. Like I think for the men's Dulip Trophy, you had every match being streamed, which is an interzonal tournament. So that should be happening for the women as well.
Hopefully that is the reality, and us as fans not begging for like the bare minimum, right? You see countries like Australia and England literally do it with like a one camera setup. I think as fans we can live with that. And while we're still on the topic of domestic cricket, Ayush goes on to ask us, now it's time to launch women's Ranji trophy. What is your thought? So again, to give a little context here, we have the senior women's multi-day challenger trophy and all of that that's happening, which is like again a one-off thing. And women's test cricket at large too, right, is something not a lot of countries play, and a lot of boards don't look at it as a financially viable thing. Mohit, again, two questions here. Do you agree with Ayush of starting a women's Ranji trophy? As fans, I think we would really love it, but then looking at from a commercial point, standpoint, and even from a women's test cricket perspective, like where do you stand on it?
I think we've spoken a lot about women's test cricket in our previous episodes and chats. So that I think you only summed it up best when you said that boards don't see it as financially viable. In fact, a lot of boards don't even see men's test cricket as financially viable. And there also now we might be having two tiers and all of that. But just to come back to Ayush's question, I don't think like there are enough tournaments for the women as of now. And like you rightly pointed out, there is the multi-day trophy, and that I think works best because you have like 90 players playing there, which are probably, if not all 90, like 60 of them are like India's best players, and it's important for just those people to play. Maybe at the age group level, you can have one multi-day tournament, like a interzonal or something of that sort, because they get that experience of playing days cricket early. But otherwise, I don't think this is something that will happen because, unlike it doesn't happen in any other country, at least for the women. And also, like, we have 37 teams. So for 37 teams to play a multi-day tournament isn't really feasible because it takes up a lot of time as well on the calendar. And in India, you can only play between October to March. The other months are either too hot or too rainy. So you'd much rather play cricket that you're likely to play at the international level. To BCCI's credit, like they have been organizing 4-day games for India A as well against Australia A, England A, etc., which is great. So I think that is something that can happen more, but I don't think a domestic multi-day tournament other than what we have currently is viable, considering all factors.
Yeah, fair point. And hopefully, when Mohit and I have this conversation about women's test cricket or even red ball cricket in women's cricket, things have changed a lot. And, we see a lot more countries play. I think one of the biggest shame is that New Zealand, the White Ferns, the likes of Sophie Devine and Susie Bates would have never played test cricket, right? And hopefully that is the reality that can change. And, if not them, at least the White Ferns at some point get to play some form of test cricket. And just slightly, taking a conversation to the WPL, Mohit, we have a question from a sports fan who goes on to ask us, since we're delving into the future, do you see an increase in the number of teams, matches, venues in upcoming WPL seasons, or is it too soon? Yeah.
I think out of those three, like the first thing that will increase will be the venues. We've already seen that, like we've gone from one city to two cities and then four cities. So I think we'll soon have five cities in the WPL, maybe if not the next season, the season after that, because teams now gradually have their loyal fan bases. At least the three that have been in existence, even in the IPL, have a very dedicated fan base. The other two teams are probably still building it. So I think once the other two teams also have that fan base in place, you will have matches in all the five venues. The number of teams and the matches, I think, is a function of the teams because you directly have a thing where you play everyone twice. So once the number of teams increase, only then the matches will increase. I don't see the matches increasing before that because the WPL season also clashes with the international home season for countries like South Africa, Australia, England. So you can't really have it for more than, say, 30 days or so. So unless the number of teams increase, I don't see the number of matches increasing. And as for the number of teams, I think now because like both for IPL and WPL, they've usually had a 3-year cycle. Maybe in the exceptional circumstance, it's gone up to four, like during COVID or during the suspension of CSK and RR. But yeah, so now I think the only time when it'll increase is probably in 2028, which will be the completion of the next 3-year cycle. So I think that is when the number of teams will increase because uh, if they had wanted to increase it, this was the right time before the mega auction. So now I think it'll only be in 2028, which will also be the year when the Olympics will have cricket finally and all of that. I think there'll be good context around it and say, imagine India women winning gold at the Olympics. So then, like, there will be even double or triple the pressure that there is right now. And then hopefully we will see maybe one, two, or three more teams in the WPL as well.
Yeah, I think as the eternal optimists that we are, we will hope for more teams to get added in the WPL as soon as possible. And even just looking at the WPL itself, Mohit, like, do you believe that the WPL has had an impact, on Indian women's cricket? Because this is what the first ODI World Cup ever since the league was, instituted. So I mean, correlation doesn't necessarily imply causation, but then a tendency to probably just go in that line of thought and just look at the WPL and the kind of impact it has had, the players it has thrown up, right?
Yeah, it's had massive impact, not just on India, but also on the other countries. Like, I was listening to an interview that Marizan had done with Anjum Chopra, where she spoke about how playing these leagues has actually helped her in the big finals. Whereas some of the other more experienced players, like Kayabonga Khaka, is the one she named, who's never played in a major T20 league final, still gets very nervous in the big matches. And I think that we had that question about South Africa and what they are lacking in the big matches. I think it is probably this also because they only have those two or three players who are regulars in these big leagues and in the finals. Whereas for India, like somebody like Deepti, she's played in a final of the 100 where she hit the winning run. So I'm sure that gave her a lot of confidence. Similarly, when it comes to the WPL, somebody like Aman Jotes played in two finals. Kranti and Charni, I don't think they would have debuted for India had it not been for the WPL. And they've played under lights, they've played in front of full houses, they've played with the dew around in front of full houses. So I think all those things made a huge difference for the Indian players. Whereas say in 2022 or even 23, only people like Harman Smriti would have played in a major league in front of a packed house in a big final. So now you don't just have two players, but you have like 8, 9, 10 players who've done that. And that I think makes a major, massive difference.
Yeah, it certainly does. And again, just hoping that the WPL continues to throw a lot of players, into the system and, who can eventually end up playing for the Indian team. And as we talk right now, Mohit, I think we were hoping that, the WPL retentions list would be out. I think the teams have a deadline to submit it by tonight, and we'd probably get the names by, tomorrow. Again, Samir, do you feel that given this World Cup, the kind of performances we've seen from some of the players, like the franchises and the teams, would be slightly inclined and sort of retaining them? Like, one of the names that really comes to my mind is that of Nadine de Klerk, right? The way she's been, and how Mumbai Indians would be like, should we probably just look in that direction? But at last, like, what are some of the retentions that you are looking for per team, and the World Cup might have a little bit of an impact in that direction?
I think knowing the kind of recency bias that works not just in WPL but in any league, I think the World Cup will definitely have a major impact, especially for the players who've like played already in the WPL and had performances. Like for example, if Gujarat Giants now has to choose between Beth Mooney and Laura, probably they would lean towards Laura because of what happened in the World Cup. Whereas previously, maybe they would have leaned towards Beth considering she's probably been the better performer in the 3 seasons of the WPL. So I think in those kind of cases is where the World Cup will have an impact. Coming to Nadine, I don't think in her case it might probably have an impact because MI already has the probably three of the best all rounders in the world, out of which they can anyways retain only two. So I don't think people like Nadine or Chloe would unfortunately come into that equation. It's more a choice as to which two out of those three do they retain. But I think for somebody like DC, GG, and all, that is where the World Cup performances will come into play. Because somebody like Annabelle Sutherland, again, has never had a great WPL season, but she was the standout pacer in this World Cup. So now there might be and she's also very young compared to a Meg Lanning or a Marizan Kapp. So now the choice for DC is to maybe go with the experienced pros or go with someone like her. So that is where I think the World Cup performances will come into the equation. And talking about like the exciting bit, I think like there is that option to retain one uncapped Indian. So that is what I'm really looking forward to because like at least the three teams that have gone to the WPL final have some really exciting uncapped Indian talent. Like When it comes to DC, they have Nikki Prasad. When it comes to RCB, they have somebody like Prema Rawat, who did well on that Australia A tour. And when it comes to Mumbai, they obviously have Sanskriti Gupta, who did really well. They have Kamalini, who won that World Cup. And they also have a very unusual bowler in Amandeep Kaur, who's probably the only left-arm wrist spinner in the WPL. I think that is what I'm really looking forward to. Like, who are the uncapped Indians that the team retain? Because that is also a long-term investment. The big names, obviously, like even if you pick, say, Phoebe and Laura over Beth and Ash, like the other two will go for big bucks at the auction. And all four are big names. And similarly, like whichever two you pick out of Marizan, Meg, and Annabelle Sutherland or Haley, Amelia, and Nat, all of them are proven performers. So it's just that whoever's not picked will rake in the big bucks at the auction. But yeah, it's like the Indian names that I'm really excited about. Like, who are the ones that franchisees choose to retain? And for the ones that have performed really well and will potentially be let go, like somebody like Shikha Pandey or even Saika Ishak, who was really good in the first 2 seasons, like I'm excited to see what kind of money they get at the auction.
Yeah, definitely a lot of interesting names you bring in there, Mohit. And to all the viewers who are still sticking around, just check out Mohit's Twitter. He's been like very descriptive about, what are some of the retentions that teams can sort of opt for. We have a few interesting questions coming in, Mohit. We're almost reaching the end of our discussion, but let's probably, take these questions up. Hari Prasad goes on to ask us, given that Indians play franchise cricket outside India, do you think the IPL franchises acquiring the 100 franchises would benefit Indian cricket in any way?
I think definitely it would, especially for the franchisees which have a team both in the WPL and the 100, because you'll see a lot more synergy like you do for the men's teams. Like there are guys who play for the same team across 4 or 5 countries or continents. So I think you'll start seeing that a lot more now in the 100 as well, because like he's rightly pointing out, a lot of Indian players in the recent past have chosen to skip the 100 and not even go into the auction, especially the big names. But now you might have a case where they might end up playing the 100 as well, because it's the same team that owns a franchise in the WPL as well, and they have a great relationship with them. So I think this should definitely lead to increased Indian representation in the 100. And again, like we spoke about, people like Smriti, Deepti, they've benefited immensely from playing in the 100. So you will have that benefit for other Indian women's cricketers as well now.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much of knowledge transfer and just interactions that you have, right, with these international stars and just rubbing shoulders, being in the same environment as them, largely benefiting as well. And even more, just looking at the domestic side of things, we had the senior women's T20 trophy conclude, Maharashtra pulling off such an incredible win, the interzonal T20 trophy going on. There's just so many names, right, who have performed really well. Are there any specific players that you're keeping your eyes peeled on, at least from an auctions perspective, that, hey, I think these players are going to go for big money, especially the Indian domestic players?
Yeah, I think like going by the first auction obviously was a mega auction, but going by the last 2 auctions, like the trend that we've seen is franchisees like to invest in really young Indian players with a lot of potential as opposed to people who've played for India or are experienced. Like in the year before last, we saw those huge bids for Kashvi Gautam and Brinda Dinesh. Even last year, you saw a huge bid for someone like Kamalini. So I think that trend is definitely going to continue. You obviously will have all the big names this time, probably not from an Indian sense, because I think like most of the playing 11 in the final will be retained. So you'll only have like maybe 2 or 3 names, but all the big overseas names will be there, or quite a few of them will be there. But I think when it comes to the Indian buys, like people would really want to invest in some talented young Indians. So, say if somebody like Shreyanka Patil goes back into the auction, I can fully imagine her getting a massive bid, because I think if RCB retain only 2 Indians, it will be Smriti and Richa. If they choose to retain 3 Indians and 1 overseas, then probably Shreyanka will also be retained. But if they choose to retain 2 overseas, then Shreyanka can't be retained. But talking about the young performers, I think somebody like Vaishnavi Sharma's one to keep an eye on. Under 19 World Cup winner, lead wicket taker in the senior women's T20 trophy, lead wicket taker in the interzonal so far. Somebody like Diya Yadav, very Shafali Verma like teenage prodigy, plays for Haryana, only 16, scored a double hundred in the under 15s last year or the year before that. So I think these two are the ones to keep an eye on. Otherwise, like if they want to go for the proven performers, I'd say somebody like Anuja Patil would be a great investment. Like one of the very few genuine all rounders, has done it for India at the international level in World Cups as well. I don't think I don't know if they will bid for her this time, but I think somebody like her could be a great addition to have for any team. Maybe like UP and MI have a great off spinner, but I don't think the other three teams, like obviously GG have Ash Gardner, but they don't have a great Indian off spinner. So I think RCB again, like depending on whether they retain Shreyanka or Sneh, they'll again have a good off spinner. But GG and DC are probably teams that can look at someone like her because she brings a lot of value with the bat as well and not just with the ball. And apart from that, I think someone like Kiran Navgire, if she goes back into the auction, will fetch a massive bid just because of a unique skill set. You don't have anyone apart from, say, Shafali Verma or Richa Ghosh and Harmanpreet Kaur who can score that 30, 40 ball 100. So somebody like her again, I think, will fetch a massive bid if she goes back into the auction.
Yeah, I mean, definitely interesting times to see how the auction and the dynamics sort of play out, right? Largely depends on, again, the retentions and how that will be. But Mohit, almost as we reach the end of our discussion, do you have any last and final remarks? I know we chronicled India's journey. We looked at a lot of other points, from an Indian perspective and sort of ended it with the WPL. But do you have any last and final thoughts for our viewers?
Yeah, I think there was a question on Tita Sadhu as well, so I'll just answer that as well quickly since we had that up. So I think like again, she's somebody who was player of the final in the Under 19 World Cup, has shown a lot of potential when she's played for India as well as unfortunately had a few injury setbacks. But she again is definitely someone who I think will play a lot for India because one thing is like having that talent and skill sets, but it's also about having that maturity and calm head on your shoulders, which someone like her definitely has. Like her bowling actions really good, her temperament's really good. She like has a lot of that Jhulan Goswami kind of aura. Obviously, I don't want to put any pressure on her, but tall bowler gets the ball to move around, very disciplined, bowls good lines and length. So I think if she gets the right kind of guidance, she definitely will play a lot for India. And even if not that, she can definitely be a WPL legend, I feel, because now we've had so many players who are IPL legends, right? Who might have not played a lot for India. But I think she's someone who's still very young. So hopefully will play a lot of World Cups for India. Like she just has to look at her DC teammate Jemimah for inspiration. Missed out on the last ODI World Cup and was one of the absolute stars this time around. So you never know. Titas could be the one leading India's attack in the next World Cup. She definitely has what it takes. So yeah, and as for final thoughts, I think just really excited to see what this auction and also like the upcoming year has in store for the Indian team because now there's a T20 World Cup as well. And hopefully winning the ODI World Cup like gives them that confidence of being able to do it in the T20 World Cup as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of exciting things in store, definitely. But thank you so much, Mohit, for again coming on board. I know I promised you like a 30, 45 minute conversation, but yeah, this ended up becoming like a 1 hour, 16-minute thing. But that's how it is, right? Conversations with us never have like a proper time limit, but really enjoyed it. And to all of our viewers who joined in, thank you so much. We loved your comments. And yeah, Mohit, here's looking forward to a lot of collaborations like this in the future too. And long live women's cricket. Cheers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for